Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 51, Bulbasaur's Mysterious Garden. The episode begins with Ash and the gang on their way to Cinnabar Island for Ash's next gym battle, because it's been almost fucking 20 episodes since we had a gym battle, but we're not there yet though, as Ash has to battle a random-ass trainer first, which is actually pretty rare for him. It's rare that we see him do regular-ass trainer battles, but this time around, he was battling a hiker who proceeds to send out his Rhyhorn after challenging Ash to a battle, as Ash accepts and sends out the Bulbasaur. Rhyhorn is immediately instructed by the hiker to use Takedown, and instantly hits Bulbasaur before Ash can tell it to use Leech Seed, which scares Pikachu and Brock and Misty, as they hadn't seen Ash get his ass beat like this for a long time at this point. And Rhyhorn had essentially caused an earthquake-level shake with the ferocity of its attack. Bulbasaur is so fucking beat up by this one takedown that Ash is to the point where he contemplates forfeiting the match and tries to recall Bulbasaur back into his Pokeball, but Bulbasaur's like, "No bitch, I'm not that weak, don't send me back." Brock commends Bulbasaur's determination and tells Ash not to let it back in if it wanted to battle, and essentially give it another chance. The hiker then attempts to taunt Ash by calling him a bad trainer, stating that only fucking noob trainers would have Pokemon that would be unable to attack or refuse to return to their Pokeball. And he then sends his Rhyhorn with yet another takedown. Oh god, what was going to happen to Bulbasaur this time? Well, thankfully, Bulbasaur teaches this fucking Rhyhorn and this hiker a lesson, and uses Razor Leaf to stop the Rhyhorn, and then uses a Vine Whip as well to finish off the battle, rendering Rhyhorn unable to battle as Ash celebrates. This causes the hiker to apologize and change his tune, stating that Ash was actually a really good trainer after all, and also complimented his Bulbasaur. Man, that was a fast switch up. Just then, Ash notices that his Bulbasaur appeared to be severely injured despite winning the battle, to the point where it was basically crippled, it couldn't even get up, and the bulb on its back was glowing a light blue color. This causes Ash and the gang to panic, not understanding the reason why, so they run to their nearest Pokemon Center, which takes them all the way till nighttime. But they eventually arrive, and Ash informs Nurse Joy of what's going on, leading Nurse Joy to concernedly get her Chansey to put Bulbasaur on a stretcher and drag him into the ER, as Ash pleads with her to help it. Once Bulbasaur is in the operating room, Nurse Joy then puts a strange machine on it, which allows her to detect somehow that Bulbasaur was not hurt or sick, but instead ready to evolve. Ash is overjoyed at this, obviously, as Brock states that it was about time due to how long it's been since Ash caught Bulbasaur and how much stronger it's gotten since then. Absolutely positive that Bulbasaur's evolution into Ivysaur was in fact imminent. Nurse Joy then leads Ash and the gang to the window, where she shows them the garden that was just outside, explaining that a garden would be the location where Bulbasaur would evolve, as that is where Bulbasaur connects most with nature, is a mysterious, powerful garden, adding that the one outside the Pokemon Center was just the very beginning of a larger stretch of gardens, and the one at the end of the path was the true destination. Later that night, when Ash and the gang are asleep, having made plans to sleep over at the Pokemon Center while Bulbasaur still healed up, Bulbasaur was still in the ER, but had woken up in the middle of the night when he spotted some Bulbasaur walking outside in a long-ass line, heading somewhere. He decides to follow them, creeping past Ash and the gang's room on his way out, to the point where he wakes up Pikachu by accident, and Pikachu decides to follow Bulbasaur, curious where he was going, with Bulbasaur unaware. Bulbasaur and Pikachu then eventually arrive upon a horizon and watch the view of the flowers and the moon, with the other Bulbasaur that Bulbasaur followed there mysteriously absent. Suddenly, though, the Bulbasaur come out of hiding as Bulbasaur and Pikachu are talking about the awesome view, and trap Bulbasaur in their vines, and proceed to try and take Bulbasaur further into the woods, presumably to that garden that was further down from the Pokemon Center that was their destination that Nurse Joy mentioned. Pikachu tries to follow them, scared for what was going to happen to Bulbasaur, and initially attempts to use his Thunder Shock in order to attack them, but Bulbasaur then urges Pikachu, as he's being taken away, that going back to the Pokemon Center to get Ash would be a better idea, as opposed to Pikachu charging in on its own. So Pikachu obliges and does just that, rushing back and informing Ash of the situation, causing them to all get up in the middle of the night and run after Bulbasaur. Meanwhile, in the same forest where all the Bulbasaur were, Jesse and James were walking through, with Jesse examining all of the sparkling flowers in the area, absolutely enthralled by them. James, on the other hand, was not, as, for one, he hated flowers, and two, he had allergies. So I guess that's just why you hate flowers then, James. You're just biased because of the allergies. With all the Bulbasaur being in the same forest, Team Rocket eventually do run into them, and this obviously leads them to want to steal all the Bulbasaur, because when do they not want to steal Pokemon, right? But thankfully, the Bulbasaur are able to defend themselves, using Vine Whip on Team Rocket, sending them blasting off immediately after they were introduced into the episode. Awesome. Hopefully we won't have to deal with them again. Hint, hint. It's then revealed, though, that Team Rocket hadn't been blasted off far, simply just into a tiny little pit that was in the forest, and so this implies that they would be back relatively soon, as they were already in the process of climbing out. Great. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had also made their way into the forest where the Bulbasaurs were located, and immediately spotted pollen. Brock knew that this was a sign that the Bulbasaurs were nearby, as the pollen was a force of nature that was related to the Bulbasaur and their bulbs, and must have been reacting to the immense amount of Bulbasaur in the area that were getting ready for their evolution. Suddenly, another mysterious force of nature happens, as the tree branches suddenly start to tangle together out of nowhere and form a huge-ass magical barrier. It is originally unclear how this had happened, or if it was also a cause of the Bulbasaur's coming evolution, but it didn't matter to Ash and the gang, as Ash ordered them to press through anyway, determined to find his Bulbasaur. When they eventually make it past the barrier, they have arrived at the destination that Nurse Joy talked about, known as the Great Mysterious Garden. Ash and the gang were obviously amazed by the view that they found themselves able to admire as they spotted all of the Bulbasaur who had gathered by a tree stump in the garden. It did seem as though this were the place that all the Bulbasaur were meant to evolve, as suddenly a whole bunch of foliage and flowers started growing everywhere, signifying the place's strong connection to nature, which is what was necessary for Bulbasaur to evolve. Proving the connection, all this growth didn't just start out of nowhere. It was because the Bulbasaur had started chanting, which implied that their chants were the reasoning for all this growth, and was the link between them. One of the central trees that has grown in the area then starts to glow as a Venusaur comes out of it, and Ash scans the Venusaur on his Pokedex, confirming that Venusaur was not the second stage of Bulbasaur, but the final stage. This leads Brock to comment how Venusaur emerging when Bulbasaur chanted was essentially like foreshadowing to the future that the Bulbasaurs were going to have to endure, and it was like the Venusaur was coming in to essentially get them ready to achieve his level of existence. With all the Bulbasaur sidetracked by being enthralled by this Venusaur that they clearly held in such high regard, Ash took the opportunity to look around for his Bulbasaur to see if he could find it. He was struggling since there were like thousands there, and he couldn't tell a difference. But then Misty reminded him that Nurse Joy had put a bandage on Bulbasaur in the Pokemon Center, so it acted as an easy identifier. Which leads him to eventually spot his Bulbasaur. When he does, he yells out in excitement for Bulbasaur to come to him, leading Brock to swiftly put his hand on his face, being like, Ash, shut your ass up, bro. All these Bulbasaur have likely never had human contact before. If they hear you, they could all come charging at us and find out our location. I don't think Brock had to be concerned about that right now, though, as all of the Bulbasaur, including Ash's, as well as the Venusaur, were very much sidetracked as they had begun the process of evolving now that Venusaur was out there. Venusaur roared, signifying that it was time for the Bulbasaur to evolve. And the Bulbasaur all responded with their own roars, and all their bulbs started glowing as the glow spread to their entire body. As for Ash's Bulbasaur, though, he tried his best to resist the glowing, while the rest of them embraced it. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had dug themselves out of the little hole in the forest that they had found themselves in, and had now encountered the same barrier that Ash and the gang had. James initially suggested for Meowth to deal with the barrier by just simply scratching it with its claws, but Meowth, acting like an uptight little fashionista, declined, arguing that he had just got his claws manicured. I don't know when the fuck he had time for that, but anyways, this leads Team Rocket to go with another plan as they pull out weapons such as axes, saws, and scythes in an attempt to cut the barrier, but then the barrier comes alive and begins to attack them. Likely caused by one of the Bulbasaur while it was evolving. It probably sensed Team Rocket's presence and it was like, look, I do not want them to interrupt my fucking evolution, so I'm gonna connect with nature here and make sure that Team Rocket doesn't interfere. Chase the fuckers away. Speaking of the Bulbasaur's evolution, with the exception of Ash's Bulbasaur, which we'll get to later, that is what most of them were doing. The ones at the highest level evolving first, as they had the most experience connecting with nature, meaning that nature deemed them fit to evolve first. Ash then whips out his Pokedex and stares at all the Ivysaur as they continue to evolve in amazement, as Pikachu does as well, his eyes sparkling. Brock then comments how people have always debated on whether Bulbasaur was a bug or grass type because of the bulb on its back, and due to its connection with nature in general, implying that it could be connected to both the bugs and the grass. He further stated how this evolution solidified that, and that all life on Earth was connected as one. Now we go back to Ash's Bulbasaur, who was still refusing to evolve, by resisting the glowing. It's implied that Bulbasaur didn't want to evolve because it wanted to prove that it was strong without evolving, and that it was an independent Pokemon, likely related to how it was independent when Ash first found it back in episode 10, and was dedicated to protecting everyone that was weaker around him, and he obviously didn't want to cop out, and he saw an evolution as that, which would basically be him admitting that he was weaker than he actually was. The rest of the now Ivysaur, along with the Venusaur, then notice how Bulbasaur had refused the evolution, and the Venusaur essentially states how he was angry at Bulbasaur for denying the will of nature and their connection, and proceeds to try and hit Bulbasaur with Vine Whip as a punishment. But Ash then jumps in at the last second as he spots this, and takes the Vine Whip like a champ, right on his shoulders, saving Bulbasaur. This causes the Venusaur to get even more mad, not just because its attack had been blocked, but because Ash, a human, was in the Sacred Nature Garden with them that was meant for just the Bulbasaurs and Ivysaurs at this moment. Ash apologizes for intruding on their evolution, stating that he didn't intend to disturb them, but he had just come to rescue his Bulbasaur as he was worried about it. He then attempts to defend his Bulbasaur, stating that if Bulbasaur didn't want to evolve, then it shouldn't have to, adding that he was sure that Bulbasaur had his own reasons for the matter that weren't related to wanting to disrespect nature. As if on cue, though, the Venusaur then manipulates nature even more, using his max power, being at his last stage, and causes a whole bunch of red flowers to bloom on multiple more trees to sprout up. He did so in a last attempt to demonstrate to Bulbasaur that you needed to be at your full evolution to reach the full connection with nature, but Bulbasaur still denied to evolve, even as Misty began to agree with the Venusaur, being amazed at what it was capable of, and trying to convince the Bulbasaur that, like, wouldn't you like to do that too, Bulbasaur? Like, it's so beautiful. But Bulbasaur wasn't having any of it, man. And thankfully, Ash still respected this. You think being a trainer, you'd want your Pokemon to evolve at all costs, right? But Ash goes up to his Bulbasaur and apologizes for jumping the gun and initially thinking that Bulbasaur wanted to evolve when Nurse Joy mentioned it, which puts Bulbasaur in a little bit of a better mood, knowing that at least its trainer respected its wishes. Just then, though, Team Rocket, somehow escaping the tree branches, arrives in their balloon, and they brag that they were indestructible, implying that they had done some intense ninja moves in order to defeat the tree roots, as they were wearing some form of like ancient Yukata ninja costumes, and they had to have defeated the tree branches some way, right? Team Rocket then go through with their initial plan and the reason why they had come back in their balloon in the first place, which was to catch the Bulbasaur, who were now Ivysaur, as well as the Venusaur. They do so by utilizing a huge vacuum and trying to suck up the Ivysaur and Venusaur into a huge bag. Ironically, when Team Rocket isn't even focused on trying to catch Pikachu, they actually come somewhat close to being able to do so, as Pikachu gets caught in the vacuum and gets lifted up. But thankfully, Bulbasaur then uses Vine Whip to catch Pikachu and drag him back down to the ground, much to Pikachu and Ash's relief, as Ash thanks Bulbasaur. Ash then instructs Bulbasaur to attack Team Rocket with a Razor Leaf, but unfortunately, his Razor Leaf misses due to the strong force of the vacuum. This is the reason why Jessie and Meowth proceed to laugh their asses off when James asks if they should try and capture Ash's Bulbasaur as well, stating that they thought Bulbasaur was way too weak, and must be a wimp compared to all the Ivysaur due to not evolving. Bulbasaur, wanting to prove it could connect with nature just as much as any of its evolved forms, then shouts, just as the Ivysaur did when they were evolving, and on command, the sun suddenly rises, just like magic, and then the sun's energy goes straight into Bulbasaur's bulb, which causes Ash to use his Pokédex to determine what was happening. The Pokédex reveals that Bulbasaur was in fact connecting with nature, getting ready to use an attack known as Solar Beam, which utilizes energy absorbed from the sun. As if on cue, Bulbasaur releases all the energy from its bulb, unleashing a solar beam on both the bag that now contained all the Ivysaur and Venusaur, along with Team Rocket's balloon, exploding both of them and sending Team Rocket down. Not blasting off quite yet, though. However, since the bag was destroyed, all of the Ivysaur and Venusaur were free, and they were now falling down to the ground at rapid speed. Thankfully, though, Bulbasaur then assists them by using Razor Leaf to create a small gust of wind that keeps them levitated so that they are able to land safely. As for Team Rocket, they're in complete shock that the explosion didn't send them blasting off as usual and only down to the ground, but then the freed Ivysaur and Venusaur, now really pissed off at Team Rocket for what they did, attack them all relentlessly, sending them blasting off. Damn, that's kinda embarrassing, guys. You guys survived an explosion, but you were sent blasting off by some vines? Good job. Ash then congratulates Bulbasaur on proving itself and defeating Team Rocket, with Venusaur even joining in on the congratulations, extending one of its vines to Bulbasaur, essentially like offering a high five, leading Bulbasaur to do the same. Best high five of all time. This high five now signified that Venusaur had respected Bulbasaur, realizing that you didn't need to evolve to have a connection with nature after all. Yay! The episode then ends as Ash and the gang say goodbye to the Ivysaur and Venusaur and walk off to continue their journey. But not before they notice that a lot of the trees and flowers that were created by the Venusaur had disappeared, signifying that they appeared and reappeared every year when the Bulbasaur had their yearly evolution time.